And we're live. Every great leader must learn to do this one thing. In today's episode, we're going to break down this habit and teach you how to implement it into your leadership.
Welcome to the World Changers Show with Matt McWilliams. I'm your host, Mark Sieverkrop, a world changer just like you and Matt. On each show, we're going to bring you an inspiring person or message to help you unleash the world changer inside of you and live with passion, lead with purpose, and leave a legacy. Thanks for joining us today. Now let's get started.
Yeah, that was pretty good there, my new co-host.
Thanks.
Well, welcome to episode 80, everybody. Hey, you may have heard this different voice. It's not my voice welcoming you to the show today. It was my good friend, not my new friend. We've been friends for a while. But my good friend and my new co-host, Mark Sieverkrop. Mark, we told people a little bit about you in the last episode when I previewed these changes that we were going to have here in episode 80. But take a moment and tell us about yourself and kind of how we perhaps we arrived at this point where you're co-hosting today. And I know I'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
So you mentioned it last week, and now I get to be the rebuttal, right? Is that what this is?
Exactly. Yeah, dispute everything I said good about you last time.
That's right. We, Matt and I, we met actually on Chris Licurdo's blog commenting, and I think we would both agree we're arch enemies at that point in time. We took every opportunity we could to insult each other and make fun of each other. And, through a couple of years, I don't even know how it happened, really. I think I asked you if I could chat with you on the phone one time and ask you some questions about networking, I think it was. And, through that, we started talking a little bit more. And, recently up through a couple months ago, we chat quite often and bounce up business ideas and whatnot. And I don't know if it's a good idea or not, Matt, but you came up with this crazy idea to have me help you out with the podcast and do some co-hosting in the vein of what Michael Hyatt's doing. And so, yeah, that's how we got to where we are now and helping you out.
So tell the listeners where are you? We're turning this around. I'm interviewing you here.
I know.
Where are you? What part of the world are you in?
I'm in my basement. Oh, I live in Washington State, right in the middle. There's not a lot of Starbucks and there's no trees, and it's actually like 103 today. So everything you know about Washington is not true for where I live. There's sagebrush and a lot of sun and a lot of semi-arid desert. So.
Everything I thought about Washington has been completely just busted.
It's true.
Which I already knew that you told me before, but well, hey guys, this is something Mark will normally do as the co-host, but just wanted to give you, before we kind of go over the new changes, wanted to point out something real quick so you make sure that I remember to say it. The show notes page today you can find at mattmcwilliams.com/080. Now, I talked about this in episode 79, but just a quick recap, some of the changes that we're going to have. We are going to the co-host format. If you haven't figured that out by yet, I'm worried about you. But we're going to this co-host format. And really what Mark's purpose is, I don't know, threefold. One is to help bring out my best. I've been doing, especially in the solo episodes, I do these monologues, essentially. It's just me talking. And frankly, I think that you're missing out on my best because I just get to say what I say and I'm not really challenged. And then point two, I guess, reason number two would be on that is to offer a differing opinion, to offer a counterpoint, to be able to, suggest something that maybe, comes from a different background than I came from or different life experiences. And third is to really keep us focused and to keep us really on target with what the message is. And you'll notice that how Mark will do that throughout the podcast. The second big change is we're now doing video. And the cool thing about this video, I did not mention it in episode 79, is that we're not doing a polished video. We're not going to have, the video is not going to be, like fancy. Just to be clear, we're actually doing kind of more of a behind the scenes look. And so what that means is, the video that you'll get of Mark and I, we're recording it on doing a Google Hangout. And you're literally going to see us. When you listen to the podcast will be polished. There will be intro music and there will be outro music, just as if you're used to the podcast that way, that's what you're getting. And there's no errors I guess you could say, in the podcast. In the video, you're going to get the outtakes, but they're not going to be at the end. They're going to be just throughout. And so you're going to actually get access to us in a way that we've never done before, where you actually get to see us discuss. If I mess up and then maybe I don't understand, what he's asking, we'll probably edit that in the podcast. And in the video, you'll actually get to see that. And then the third thing is, and it ties right into today's topic, really, is I am delegating. One of the reasons I brought on a co-host is I'm delegating a lot of the work to Mark in terms of show prep. The amount of time, and I mentioned this around about episode 65, the amount of time that goes into prepping for a show, writing out my ideas, fleshing out my thoughts, getting a title and preparing the page that you guys go to, the show notes page, is literally 3 to 4 hours. And on the interviews, as much as 6 to 8 hours. It's a very time consuming process. It's a labor of love. And I hope that you can tell, wow, that definitely some time went into that when Matt does these podcast episodes. Well, now I'm able to do the part that only I can do, which is talk about these topics, and the part that only I can do, which is, to bring my life experiences to the table when we talk about these. And so I'm delegating a lot of the production and prep work to Mark. So those are the 3 ways that the podcast is changing going forward. I know you're going to love it. I know you're going to love Mark. And so if you're listening in the audio only, make sure sometime to go watch the video, and you'll see hopefully not too many mess ups, but you'll see Mark and I screw up every now and again.
Unedited.
A behind the scenes look at how the podcast goes.
So Matt, with that in mind, let's jump into the topic. That ties completely in, because it's really neat that the one thing that we're talking about that every great leader does is delegate. So at the beginning, I want you to walk the audience and walk me through the process that you went through, because you've delegated for quite some time now. I know that you've had some VAs that you've worked with, and now delegating some stuff to me. You've had this thought process, and you've worked through this process of delegating tasks. So walk us through how you got to that point.
Yeah, well, I just turned 36 as we're recording this 2 days ago, actually. And I've been a business owner or leader of some sort for more than a decade now. And for the majority of that time, I did everything myself. I just didn't delegate unless I absolutely had to. I would only delegate if it was 5 p.m. and we had something due at 7 p.m. and it was going to take 4 hours to do it. That was the only way I would delegate. It was a complete last resort. And so I spent a lot of my adult life, in panic mode, because I felt like I was the only person who could do so many things. And I remember I hired my first assistant in 2007. I think that's right. Might have been late 2006. Read the book, The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, and got this idea, like, I need to hire a virtual assistant. And it never really occurred to me when I hired her to delegate anything of importance, though. I only hired like menial tasks and, hey, can you dedupe this spreadsheet and things like that. And then I did the same thing with my next assistant, and then my next one, where I continued to only delegate these very low, they required low intellectual abilities, and they didn't require anybody to really think like me in terms of, well, how would Matt respond to that email or something like that. And, my next assistant that I hired, actually I hired a not a virtual assistant, but literally we sat in the same office together. Thankfully, that guy, even though I only thought to, give him tasks that were, just the little things, he was very ambitious, and he would constantly look for opportunities to shine without me. He wouldn't wait for me to delegate things to him. And so naturally he was promoted. So, what happens when you promote your assistant is you no longer have an assistant. And
Right.
So I hired another virtual assistant, and I've been working with virtual assistants for 2007, 8. We're talking 7 or 8 years now.
Mm-hmm.
But it really was just in the past few months, past year or so, where I got to the point where I stopped automatically just doing things myself, and I would quickly assign them to someone else. And, for me, it was a tough transition. And it was very freeing as well, because my default response to when I had to get something done went from how do I do this to how can I teach this? It went from, I have to do this and that's going to take me 3 hours, to who can I give this to and who can I trust that they'll do it right. And the funny thing about that, when I did that, was, when I first started doing that exercise and giving people, these tasks, was it just got easier and easier to do it. And over time, first I had to force myself and say, wait, no, Matt, don't do this. Don't do this yourself. There's somebody else who can do this. You can explain to somebody how to do this task. It takes 15 minutes a day. You can take an hour and explain in an hour. And then by the end of the week, you now win. At the end of 1 hour of them doing it, you gain the 15 minutes a day for the rest of your life. The really funny thing was that I noticed was every time I did it, it was like a muscle. It got easier and easier to delegate.
So, I think everybody understands the importance of delegating. I mean, I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't understand that you should delegate some things, but it takes a lot of work. I mean, you and I have been working together a little bit more, and you've been working with me and helping me see how to delegate to, say, a virtual assistant. And I know that's very different than delegating with somebody that's in the room, but that takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time. So what would you say to somebody that says that? They're like, look, I just don't have time to spend, the time when I could have just done it in that 10 minutes.
Well, you have to look at, kind of like I said, you have to look at the long-term ramifications. You say, well, I don't have an hour to train my team, but you have 10 or 15 minutes every day to do a project. That's ridiculous. Like I said, at the end of a week or 2 weeks, you make up that time. And so it's not an exact formula, but look at it this way. If something takes you even 5 minutes per day and it takes you a half hour to explain, and it takes them 10 minutes per day, odds are you have to look at the economy of your time. You have to look at, well, how much would I pay myself per hour in my business? Right. And what would that do in terms of, what I'm paying the other person? And so, it reminds me of an example. You mentioned him earlier, Michael Hyatt, talking about, he had a friend of his who was a developer, or not a developer. He had an online platform, and he was doing a lot of the coding on his website. And the guy said, Michael asked him, how much do you make per hour? What's your, if you look at, what you make per week and then divide it up, what do you make per hour? And he was like, about $300 per hour. And he said, okay, would you pay a developer $300 per hour to code your website? He's like, heck no, I'm not going to pay somebody $300 an hour. That's ridiculous. And he said, but you already are.
That's what you're doing. Yeah.
And so for me, the not having time is, it's not a valid excuse, because it's like, even if it's a one-time task and it takes me 20 minutes to explain how to do a 30-minute task, that's not a huge win. It's a 10-minute win, but I'm going to have similar tasks in the future. You think about most people's work they do is rather repetitive. You respond to the same kind of emails, you deal with the same kind of spreadsheets. And so the next time that I have a similar task to assign to an assistant or to anybody to delegate, it takes me 10 minutes to explain a 30-minute project. And the next time it takes me 5 minutes. And the next time it takes me 3 minutes. And the next time I just, it takes me 30 seconds. Right. It's like, hey, do this, boom, and they get it. Right. I don't have to explain to them that you have to click here, go over here, copy this file. There's so much less to explain.
Right. So we're gonna get into some of the things you've learned, and I think that those things that you've learned about delegating really speak to some of those fears and the concerns that people have. But before we do, I think it's important to talk about, you've learned these things. So what have you gained? What has Matt McWilliams gained by learning to delegate?
Well, number one, I've gained freedom. I've gained the freedom to have more time off, because obviously if I'm spending my 30 minutes doing something, and that's 30 minutes that I'm not spending with my family. That's 30 minutes that I'm not doing things that I am more passionate about. And I am super passionate about my business. I'm super passionate about what we're doing right now. I'm super passionate when I'm working with clients and all sorts of people. I mean, I'm passionate about it, but it's like even an artist. An artist might love painting, but does the artist really like going online to order new paint tubes? No, they're not passionate about ordering paint tubes. They're not, I'm not passionate about certain things in my business. I'm not passionate about tax time. And it's not just the paying of taxes, but doing the spreadsheets. I joke the quickest way to get me to delete your emails to send a spreadsheet as an attachment, because I'm probably not going to look at it.
Right.
I don't like them. I have an aversion to spreadsheets, but other people, they open a spreadsheet and it's like Christmas for them. You send a spreadsheet to our accountant and it was like I just gave him frankincense and myrrh. and so I don't enjoy that though. So I have, freedom for more time off or freedom to work on other parts, to work on bigger projects. So freedom to, time off, bigger projects, freedom for me to spend more time at the zoo, hopefully occasionally have a tickle fight with our daughter, to take an entire weekend off every now and again. Those are the things that I have. Freedom from distractions. If I have to spend 30 minutes working on a spreadsheet, it will take me longer than 30 minutes. What would take somebody who's skilled at that, what would take one of our VAs 30 minutes to do in a spreadsheet will take me an hour and a half, because I can only do it about 10 minutes at a time before my mind starts to wander.
Right.
And, I have an episode coming up with Dr. Dale Archer, and we actually talk about why that is a little bit. But, for me, it's just because that's not my strength. It's not what I enjoy. It's not what I'm passionate about. I literally hate spreadsheets. And so you get me in on that, and I'm in it for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then I have to do something else. So it just takes forever. And so I'm distracted, and I'm constantly bouncing around from task to task instead of focusing intently for a half hour to 45 minutes on writing a blog post or doing a podcast, something like that, where I'm passionate and I enjoy doing it. Mm-hmm. So free me up from those distractions and free me up to, enjoy the things that I do and work in my strengths. So at the end of the day, even days where I put in 10 or 12 hours, I'm not exhausted. I'm like, right. I'm excited and passionate about what I did that day. Whereas if I have to spend, if even 2 hours of my 12-hour workday on some days is spent doing stuff I don't enjoy, it's like I went through a 12-round fight with Mike Tyson. It's not pretty.
Right.
And I'm grumpy and I'm irritable at the end of the day.
And I think, you mentioned it, you and Richie talked about it in episode 79 about how you have some days where you just feel like you haven't got anything done. And I would say that a lot of times when you feel that way, it's probably because you're doing things that aren't your strengths, that you don't necessarily like doing. And I would, really encourage the audience, look at those things. And is there something that you could delegate? Is there somebody that you could say, you know what, you're better at this than me. You like doing this better than me. So why don't you go ahead and take care of that? And I think that would reduce the amount of days you have where you get to the end of the day, you're having dinner with the family and you say, man, I just feel like I didn't get anything done today and I'm completely drained. Like you said, it's like having that 12-round fight, because you're beating your head against the wall, doing something that you don't like doing. So there's freedom, but then there's also, and I think this is a weird word, and I think this is where people really have a problem with delegating, is it's that trust issue.
Oh yeah.
It's having control, and I think, with many people that are leaders and that are in the position to be able to delegate, I think that's a big problem is you're so invested and you have the responsibility for these things. How do you get to where you can trust? How do you get to where you can trust somebody well enough that you delegate to them?
Well, it's what you said is true. I didn't, the big thing for me was that I didn't trust my team. Mm-hmm. That's ultimately what you're saying. If you're not delegating, you're saying, I don't trust you.
Right.
And the funny thing is, and I always joke about the reason I'm a good marketer. The reason I'm good at marketing is I'm willing to be wrong up to 49.9% of the time. And what that means is, like in marketing, we run split tests. We do A/B testing. We say, well, will this page outperform this page? And the answer is, I don't know. I don't know which one's better. So we test. We test for 1,000 visitors, 2,000 visitors, 100,000 visitors. And whichever one wins, that's the best one. And in all seriousness, as long as I've been doing this, I've been in marketing in some way, shape, or form for 13, 14, 15 years now, I'm wrong 49.9% of the time. In all seriousness, I'm probably wrong 46% of the time. That's like, you got to think about that. I mean, like in school, if you're wrong 46% of the time, they have a word for that. It's called you fail. That's 2 words. You get to repeat, you get the luxury of repeating that grade again.
Right. Yeah.
But in marketing, I don't have to be right. I get to test it. And so I was saying, I don't trust my team. And the thing is, the reason I didn't trust them was I didn't think that they were going to do it exactly like I would. Right. But again, the reality is the exactly like I would part is only right 51% of the time. There are other ways to do things. Right. And so I cannot stress enough that the one sentence that has impacted my life the most in terms of leadership and in terms of being able to delegate it's a 3-word sentence, and it's I trust you. When you say that to a team member, stress is completely gone. Right. Because you give up control for something even better, which is, that freedom that we talked about. When I say I trust you, and that's uncomfortable for them sometimes too, especially with, people who've never been told that before. Right. But you say I trust you, and sometimes it kind of freaks them out. Like, oh wait,
but what if I'm wrong?
Yeah, you're giving me. You mean, oh, okay. Well, can I run it? Can I show it to you when I'm halfway done? Mm-hmm. And the answer sometimes is yes. You can show me the half completed project to make sure you're on the right path. But sometimes the answer is no. And here's what here's what the funny thing is. I know that when I tell them I trust them, that sometimes the finished product is gonna be bad. Right. But you give up that control, because ultimately when you don't trust somebody, you're saying I have to have control of this. I have to be 100% in charge, and I'm not willing to give up control for something bigger, which is a life of significance that, isn't wrapped up in all the details, but focused on the big picture. And when you are focused on the big picture, or focused on the little details all day long, that's when you have those days where you finish and 10 hours, 12 hours later, you're just flat exhausted. And then you think back and go, wait a minute, did I even accomplish anything?
Right.
And that's rough.
And I think, going from the other side of it too, you and I, you did that exact thing to me. I think like the 3rd or 4th day we were working together, where you're like, here, go do this and just make the decision. I trust you. Yep. And, it was so neat, because I think that's what separates a good leader from a great leader. Because there's so many times that I know we've all had a leader where it's like you do something and then they come back around and they change it on you. And you're like, well, why did I even do that? Maybe I should just run everything by you. So, I think from the side of, not even the benefits of you as the leader of taking things off your plate, but just being able to develop a team that takes ownership of what they're doing, having that trust is so important. And I think that's a big part of why you need to delegate is both of those.
And when I think back, I mean, for me, it was that lack of trust, but it was fear. It was, I think back, and there were really three things I was afraid of. I mean, I was afraid of mistakes, because here's the thing in my mind, and this is hard to admit, but it's true in my mind. If I did it, if I was the one responsible, then there weren't going to be mistakes. Which is a very egotistical thing to say, but here's the thing.
Can we ask Tara about that? Is that okay?
Sure. I know that when I send an email, it's written exactly like I would want it to be. Right. That's what I mean by mistakes. It may not necessarily be the perfect thing to say, but it was exactly what I wanted to say. Mm-hmm. And so I feared those mistakes. And here's the thing. The funny thing I learned is the mistakes that my assistants have made have never been fatal. There was probably the worst mistake that has ever been made was made very recently. And I won't go into details about it. And here's the funny thing. It's the worst mistake that anybody's ever made in me working with assistants or delegating for 8 years. And it's going to cost me 5 hours and probably $200. I'm sorry, but I'm very blessed to live in America, and 5 hours and $200 is just not a lot of time or money.
Right.
And that's the worst mistake. The second one is those, the missed deadlines, because I was afraid if I delegate something on a Monday and it's due on Thursday, is it going to get done in time? And this is the ironic thing about that. I missed more deadlines trying to do it all than we ever do as a team.
Right.
Because yes, like if you look at it on a single task, we might miss a deadline. But if I try to do everything myself, I'm going to miss multiple deadlines.
Right.
And then, the last one was this, and this is a weird, it's like an American phenomenon. I think it was appearances. I was trying to keep up appearances because this applied more to when I was in the corporate world than it does now that I'm on my own as an entrepreneur. But I had this fear of delegating because if I was delegating, I wouldn't be needed. I wouldn't be as busy, and so the American, this American standard of success, I've written a lot about this. There's a couple of 2-post series I did about, the status of being overworked and being busy and having this ridiculous workload. It's a status symbol in America.
Right.
But, if I wouldn't have to work 70 hours a week if I was delegating 40 of it, and I would, so I fell into this trap of like, I'm so needed and so necessary that I'm not going to be busy enough and I can't just relax and let other people handle it and focus on bigger things. So appearances was that third big fear.
And we'll link to those two in the show notes.
Absolutely. So
that people can read through those. But, I think everybody has that.
What's that show notes URL again there, Mark?
What's that show? mattmcwilliams.com/080. And
see, that's one of those examples where we're going to
delegated.
No, yeah, I delegated, but also where we're probably going to cut that from the audio version and do that one again. So let's go back to that and talk about. We'll link to those in the show notes and give the show notes URL.
See now you're calling me out in front of everybody on the video.
I am.
This is awesome.
Well, it's your first time.
Oh, well, thank you. Matt, that's great. And we will actually link to both of those in the show notes at mattmcwilliams.com/080. And people can take a look at those there and read through them. And they're really great. And I think you're right on. You're spot on. That is the status symbol. I think every single person probably knows somebody where they work that is that person that walks around all day long saying, I am so busy. I've got so much to do. I've got to stay until 7 o'clock tonight. And then
there's a word for that. It's stupid.
That's true. It is,
and
I mean, it's
you're not impressing me.
Right.
That's the thing. So,
well, and here's the bad thing. And here's the bad thing about it. And I've noticed this at work with where I'm working, or there's one person that does that. And the sad thing about it is that's the person that's never going to move on and get promoted, because the managers look and say, oh, well, if they're so busy now with what they're doing, we can't possibly add anything to it. We can't possibly ask them to take on this new project. We can't possibly ask them to move up to the next level because they can't handle what they've got already. They're spending way more time than everybody else. So it's this double-edged sword, and people don't realize it. So that's why it's, so important that you learn the trust and you learn to delegate and you get over those fears. And what I think is cool is, Matt, you've got some things that you've learned about delegating, 4 things that I think really speak to those fears and really kind of put them in perspective, because I really think that's what delegation is about. It's putting in perspective the time that you're actually spending, the money that you're actually spending. It's all about perspective. So let's go through those 4 things. So the first one, Matt, is that your team is smart. You realize that, and you talked about that earlier, but tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, that is the first thing I learned. It was like, oh wow, wait, my team is really capable of things. One of the first things that I remember doing with a virtual assistant, and just speaking of a virtual assistant, I'm using that as an example because they are overseas and they might be perceived as less able to do things that require a grasp of English. And I remember I was working with her for probably 6 months, and my boss came to me and said, hey, can you do this? Can you put this into a flow chart? I'm like, sure. There's a big problem. I don't know how to do a flow chart. And so I messaged my assistant, who I ended up working with for years after that, and said, hey, can you do a flow chart? Okay, can you put this into a flow chart? She said, yep. And sent it back to me about a day later. I gave it to my boss, said, here, what do you think? And he's like, this is amazing. And that was
a smart guy, Matt.
Yeah. And I was like, actually, this is who did it. And it's like, great, good job. Like, he doesn't care. He just wants it done.
Right.
And, so I learned that my team is really smart. And I learned that, yes, again, going back, they make mistakes, but, they're really smart. And so I rarely, now that the more I say, I trust you to do that, I trust you to do that, I trust you to do that, how to do that. Or even like, I trust you to find out how to do that.
Right.
You know, like, hey, google.com, go there, use it. And I trust you to figure out the best way to do this, knowing full well that I could spend 5 minutes doing the same thing or spend 5 minutes teaching, and they might spend a half hour learning how to do it.
Right.
But now they're never going to forget how to learn how to do it. And they got to learn something on their own. And I rarely get asked questions that aren't critical. You know, my team isn't, I don't get these messages about little things. I don't get messages about things that aren't, you know, urgent or important. I get messages only about urgent and important things because I trust them to make the right decision. And the only time they involve me, absolutely the only time they involve me, is when they really don't know the answer. It's not a question that they can research, and they really need my opinion. That's the only time that I get messaged or emailed or called about things going on with the team. Otherwise, there are entire days where we actually don't communicate because they're just rocking on their own, and I've given them carte blanche permission to get out there, and I trust them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, you know, as you were talking about that, the one thing that came to my mind is if they weren't smart and you didn't trust them, they wouldn't be on your team.
Well, yeah, exactly.
You know? So it's funny when people hire somebody and then they don't trust them to do something, because it's like, well, why'd you hire them in the first place? You know,
exactly.
And you touched on this, and you made this comment about them not being perfect, and they make mistakes sometimes. And I think that's important. But one of the things that I think is really neat about that trust that you give them, you know, especially when you say, I trust you to figure out how to do it. When you do that with me, you know, in my mind, it's, I'm going to make sure I do it right because Matt's trusting me. So I think really you reduce the amount of mistakes you're going to have because they've taken ownership now. They don't want your place to be misplaced, not mistrust, misplaced. And so talk a little bit more about that whole mistake thing, because I've heard you say, you know, even if they make a couple mistakes, that's still a whole bunch of stuff that you don't have to do. So walk us through that, what you've learned about that.
Well, that was the second thing I learned was my team is going to make mistakes, you know, and that's, I wouldn't say I learned that because that was kind of my fear all along, but I learned, you know, hey, newsflash, my team is made up of human beings, and newsflash, human beings aren't perfect.
Right.
But 97, 98, whatever, percent of the time, 95 out of 100 times, even if it was only 90% of the time, they make the right decision. And the thing is, like I said earlier, the 2 times they mess up, they're not fatal. And that small blip, you know, let's say that they send the wrong email to the wrong person, that they, you know, that they, in a spreadsheet, that they get the columns mixed up or something. It's not a fatal thing. And even if it adds an hour to my workload once a month, it's worth me not having to do the other 159 hours or, you know, and so it really, 200 plus hours of work. It's worth it. And even if, like I said, even if it's only 90% of the time that they got it right, it would still technically be worth it. It would be frustrating if it was only 90% of the time, but it would be still worth it. And the freedom that I gain from delegating more than makes up for the small mistakes that just, naturally occur along the way. And here's the thing. I would have messed up just as many times. And in fact, with some of these projects, I would have messed up more times because I'm not in my strengths.
Right.
You know, if we're talking about spreadsheets, for example, I keep going back to the example because I have, like I said, I have a hatred for them.
Right.
If I'm going to make more mistakes than my team will, who actually, you know, there's one in particular who's really skilled at doing things. I can say, go make this happen, and 20 minutes later, I have a beautiful report back with like extra charts and graphs I didn't even ask for.
Right.
And she's really good at that. Whereas it would take me hours to do that, and it would probably be messed up.
Right.
So,
well, and I think with those first two that we've talked about, you know, the fact that your team's smart and your team's not perfect, you know, that brings to mind the fact that so many times we have these double standards. You know, we have this standard of how we treat ourselves when we make a mistake, and then how we treat somebody else if they make a mistake. You know, and I always think of a story or an example in my life. You know, I think every parent does this, but my dad, one time I saw that there was a ding on the hood of his pickup. My dad's a farmer. And I said, Dad, what is that? What happened with the paint? And he starts laughing. And he says, oh, you know, I was leaning over my pickup to shoot at a coyote. You know, I was out on the farm and shooting at a coyote, and I didn't hit it. And I realized he'd shot the hood of his truck. And he laughed about it. But I'm sitting there thinking, if I had done that, my dad would have reamed me for being stupid and hitting the hood of the pickup and not paying attention. But that's what we do a lot of times. You know, we have this double standard, whereas if we do it, it's like, oh, it's no big deal. So we have to get over that and realize, you know what, like you said, you're going to make mistakes. So why is it not okay that they might make mistakes? And why is that a bad thing? And why is that a reason not to delegate? Because mistakes are going to get made either way. You're going to send the wrong email sometimes. You're going to say the wrong thing. The subject line is going to be wrong. You know, you're going to, whatever it is, those mistakes are going to get made anyways. But I think by delegating, you know, and this is moving into our next one, by delegating to somebody that is good at that, you actually limit the number of mistakes you have rather than increasing the number of mistakes that you make. So, you know, you've hit on this a little bit. You've talked about how your team likes to do things differently than you do. They like to do different things than you do. So talk about that a little bit more. And you've mentioned that it's good for you, but I want you to hone in a little bit. How does that help your team when you're delegating those things that they're good at?
Well, I mean, it puts them in their strengths as well. You know, obviously I'm not delegating, you know, the things that only I can do. I'm not delegating things that I'm passionate about. And as I've said, I mean, there are just things that in my business that have to be done, but I hate to do them. Mm-hmm. And there are things that I love doing and they have to be done. And I think, you know, getting a little bit off topic, but you know, over time, one of the hardest things to do is actually to delegate the things that you're really good at and you actually love doing.
Right.
But they're still not at that highest level, you know, and that happens. That's a way down the road thing. I mean, for purposes of today, I'm trying to get people to start delegating and start delegating the little things. But yeah, I mean, I mentioned, you know, our CPA there, he's a CPA. He loves those details. I can't stand the details. Right. People, I'd rather eat a handful of cotton balls than have to even open Excel. If I didn't absolutely need it for some parts of my business, I would just delete it from my computer.
Right.
And, but you know, some people, I call them weirdos. I mean that in the nicest possible way. They love those things. And so they get to work on things that, you know, that I'm not skilled at and they don't enjoy. And so the thing that I learned is other people, again, shocker that we would all have different interests, right? But my team likes to work on things that I don't. But when you take us as a whole, we have a pretty good mix of people who are skilled at, you know, the analytics side and the spreadsheet side. We have people who are really skilled at the communication side, and as a whole, it makes for a pretty good product.
Right. And I think, you know, this last one really ties in with that as well. But and we've touched on it all through this whole episode. But you know, trusting just feels better. It's just the feeling and the air around the company, the air around the emails that are sent, everything is just nicer. It's just, you know, unicorns and rainbows a lot more often if everybody trusts everybody, you know. And really delegation is, I think, as a leader, one of the biggest ways that you show that you trust somebody. I mean, you can tell until you're blue in the face, I trust you, but until you actually delegate something that matters, and a big project or something that is going to be seen by a lot of people, and you let them take the responsibility, but you also let them stand in the limelight a little bit, that's when they know they trust you. That's when they know that you really mean it when you say, I trust you, because you've shown that by delegating. So is there anything you want to add? I mean, we've talked about trust a ton, I feel like, in this episode, but is there anything you'd add to that about how trusting feels and how it helps in the delegation process?
I mean, well, it's just a better way to live. You know, it just feels better. The more I trust them, the more I trust you, the more I trust anyone, the better our relationship. And the better our relationship, the better they perform. You know, the better our relationship, the better you perform. The better you perform, the more I can give to you, the more I can give to, you know, to the team members, because the better you perform, the more money we make, the more you get. And it's this cycle. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. Right. You know, when I can think up a project, when I can have an idea and 10 minutes later have someone else working on it, as opposed to, you know, you can look at my to-do list, and instead of adding another thing to my to-do list or doing it and not working on what I should be working on, it feels really good. It feels really good to say, I have an idea, something needs to be done. So an example. I'll give an example. We just recently updated the theme on my website on mattmcwilliams.com, and that broke some stuff. That actually, I'm going into it. This was that non-fatal error the other day. Well, that means that somebody has to go in and actually fix about 500 lines of code one by one on the website. Take about 5 hours, maybe as much as 7 or 8 hours. I was like, I know how to fix that. Now, 5 years ago, what I would be doing is finding little pockets of 10 or 15 minutes here.
Okay.
That thing would not be fixed until approximately September of 2016. Instead, it'll be fixed by the end of next week.
Right.
Because I'm going to show the person how to do it and say, have at it. You go do this. And that is just it's just a much better way to live. It's more exciting. I keep them busy. I keep them employed, and I'm back to working on my strengths. And the other thing is that, it instills confidence in somebody. And when I'm able as a leader, as a human, to give somebody else confidence and make them feel good about themselves, that's a cool feeling. You think about when your kid, feels special, like how the warm fuzzies that you get inside. That's one of the greatest feelings in the world. When somebody can come to you and say, "Hey, thanks for trusting me on that," and then take it a step further. "Hey, I know I messed up last time, but thanks for trusting me again."
Right.
It's a pretty cool feeling.
Kind of makes you a world changer, I think.
I think so, a little bit.
So let's recap real quick. The 4 things that you've learned, Matt, and I think these really speak to the heart of the fears that people have or the concerns they have about delegating is, your team is smart. The fact that you have them on your team means they're smart. They have a purpose there. They're good at things. The second one is they're going to make mistakes, but that's okay because you know what? You were going to too. And they still are getting more done than if you would have been doing it yourself. The third one is that your team likes to do different things. That's very obvious to you and I, Matt, because there's accountants in the world and there's auditors in the world. I for the life of me, have no idea why anybody would do those 2 jobs, but there's tons of them. So people like to do different things, and you should let them do those things. And the fourth one is it just makes you feel better, and it makes everyone feel better when you delegate. You feel better because you have more time. You're focusing on your strengths. They feel better because you trust them. They feel better because they're working in their strengths and they're getting to take some ownership. And I think ownership's a big part of it. And that's really what makes it work, because you trust them and you show them that you trust them. So, really what it comes down to is, if you want to change the world, you have to think bigger. You have to be working on your strengths. You have to be working in your strengths, and you have to have the help of others. I mean, how many times have we seen that, Matt, when you've been interviewing people, and the people that are changing the world, the people that are making a huge difference, are you having the help of others, whether that's, in a nonprofit or a business or whatever. We can't do it alone. So in short, you have to learn how to delegate. You have to be willing to give up a little bit of control and let other people shine. And if you'll do that, that's when you can change the world. And that's when you become a great leader rather than just a good leader. Everything you want to add there, Matt?
Nothing at all. You said it well.
Okay. So we have an action item for people, and we also have a question, and they can get to those, and they can answer the question at macmillwilliams.com/080, like we've said. The action item is, pick one thing that you currently do that you could delegate, and delegate it. There's something in your life. I mean, even if you're a parent, there's something that you could delegate to your kids, whether it's putting away the dishes or cleaning up the living room. You can use this, whether you're a parent or whether you're a leader of a multi-million-dollar organization. You can delegate those things. So pick one thing and that you're currently doing and delegate it to somebody on your team. And the question is, how would you rate your ability to delegate? And then, how would your team rate your ability to delegate?
That second one's a good one.
Yeah, if those two are different, you might need to do a little bit of self-evaluation and see if there's some things you could do better. So again, answer those questions, mattmcwilliams.com/080. And on that page also, Matt, we're going to put a link to your guide to one-on-one meetings, because I think if you're delegating, it's important that you're communicating with your team. And a lot of delegating is setting forth the boundaries and setting forth the things to do and the things not to do. And so those things are done very well in a one-on-one meeting. So if you haven't got that, certainly go and download that, because that will help you to be able to do that. So before we get to the end and any final comments you have, as we often do, Matt, let's thank some reviewers, people that have been kind enough to leave us a review on the show. Do you want to go ahead and do that, or would you like me to read through them?
Well, see, this is one of those parts where we'll pause and edit here.
Oh, okay. Because you haven't got to it yet.
Yeah. Folks, we haven't figured out who's going to do this part.
And it's all Mark's fault because Matt delegated the show flow and Mark didn't put who was going to do this.
This is what happens when you delegate. Occasionally,
yeah.
This is at 2 times out of 100.
Occasionally, the person crashes and burns.
So
destroys the whole show.
Take a sip here.
So would you like to do that?
You know what? Yeah, I'll give a shout out to the people.
Okay.
And then
I can read them.
Can read the one. There's 2. Why did I highlight 2 this week?
I have no idea.
Well, we'll do that.
Short.
You can read the 2 fun things that people said. How about that?
The fun things that people said.
Do I really have to say the Fat Harry?
I think you do. Oh, I hope he's not watching the video. You're gonna offend somebody.
Oh man.
Okay, so let's start at the take a couple minutes to do some thinking. Sound good?
Fat Harry. That's
you can jump in.
A username.
Okay.
So yeah, if you'll just come back, we basically come back to Matt. Let's take a couple minutes and thank some of the folks who've left a rating and review. While I'll jump in and list the names, and then you'll read the things. Ready when you are. You were just starting to speak too. All right.
Okay, shush. So I can edit this. I gotta have some room here. Okay. So Matt, let's take a couple minutes now and let's thank some of the people that have left a rating and review for the show. As they know, and as you know, Matt, that's what helps us get discovered. So we've got 4 of them today that we can thank. Getting your money's worth on the video here. Oh man.
How am I supposed to say the fact? Do we have to? Oh man, this is tough. This is the funny. This is the funniest.
Make their name.
This is the funniest iTunes username ever. All right.
Do you need me to start over again? Or can I edit it to where you start?
Why is it that the very first time I've done 80 episodes now, and it takes 80 episodes, the first one with you, that we get to the part where I have a ridiculous username.
You had the prison professor not last time. That one was kind of interesting.
I was on his podcast recently, actually.
Oh,
yeah, good dude.
Nice.
Very good dude.
Okay.
All right, so I'll just say the names.
Okay.
Yeah, so quick shout out, Mark, to the Awesomeness Show. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that show's awesome.
I think so.
I'm not familiar with that show though, but I bet it's awesome. To Whole Being Inc., to Possibilities Junkie. We have like no real people in the list of it's all usernames today. It's crazy.
Right.
The Awesomeness Show, Whole Being Inc., Possibilities Junkie, Joan of Lamb, and the Fat Harry. That's my favorite username so far. Thank you so much, all 5 of you, for your ratings and reviews recently.
So the Awesomeness Show, which I think actually you were going to use for your title, weren't you? But it was already taken.
That must be what it is.
Yeah. It says, this is what they said. Matt's The Lie of Influence episode is absolutely fantastic. Our influence in life is not based on numbers, subscribers, retweets, followers, downloads. It's your impact on people's lives, all in caps, lives. Not only that, influence is not immediate. Influence takes time, consistency, and persistence. We cover a lot of topics on the Awesomeness Show and love that Matt is doing the same and changing the world with this show. Justin Stratton. Thanks, Justin. And I think he liked that episode. I'm gathering it. He liked that episode. And we'll link to that. Let's link to that in the show notes at mattmcwilliams.com/080 so other people can like it as well. And then Possibilities Junkie said, Matt does a great job reminding us that failure is not fatal and that the people we surround ourselves with make a difference. And that's exactly what we're talking about today. Those failures aren't the end of the world, and it's not fatal. So, Matt, any final thoughts on this episode? Any thoughts on delegation?
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, the title of the show is "Every Great Leader Eventually, learns to do this," and it's true. Every great leader eventually figures this out. It might take some longer. Some people might figure this out in months. It took me years, and I'm still learning it. But people who do it all by themselves don't make history. They don't change the world. And it takes a great team to change the world. It takes a great leader who's willing to let others shine. And it takes a leader who's willing to give up control and learn to delegate. That's the only way that you're going to be able to do this. So if you want to change the world, learn to trust and change your default from "I must do it myself." This is the big key. How can I do this? How am I going to find the time to do this? I need to get this done right away. To how can someone else do this as well or even better? And that's what we found. That's one of the things I learned, is that sometimes they even do it. They surprise me and they do it better. It is so fun for me. I get so much joy out of assigning a task and somebody comes back to me and I go, "That's better than I would have done it."
Right.
That's the ultimate. Like when that happens the first time, you realize this delegating thing is fun. And it does, like I said, it's like a muscle. It gets your ability to do it gets stronger and stronger, and you actually get addicted to it in a good way.
I couldn't agree more. There's nothing I could say beyond that. So, folks, thanks so much for being with us today. Next week, Matt, you interview Jason Kotecki. Is that how you say it? That's all right.
Yeah, Jason Kotecki. Yeah.
So, what if you were to give the 10 or 15-second version of what you guys talk about and why we should all come back next week? What would you say? What do you and Jason talk about?
So, this is for those on video. You can see this book. It's called "Penguins Can't Fly." And now I'm going to actually cut, because I just realized I hate saying "for those on video," and then the audio listeners feel like second-class citizens.
All right, now I got to make a note of where I got to cut again. I'm learning that if I make a note of where it is, generally it'll probably go faster.
That's true.
Easier to get back to. Okay, so let me do that again.
So
you ready?
Yeah, you already said it. You did it. If you want, or do you want to say that again?
No, that's fine. You can jump in.
Yeah, so I was actually honored to be joined by Jason Kotecki. He's the author of a really cool book called "Penguins Can't Fly" and 39 Other Rules That Don't Exist. And it's a book, I'll take a picture of it actually.
Okay.
And it's a book that my wife, we talk about this in the interview. My wife wouldn't let me highlight it because it's one of the most beautiful books ever. So I have all these little stickers like in between like every other page practically. I might as well just like say, "Hey, the whole book's awesome," because it is.
Right.
And it's a book about escaping adultitis, as Jason says. And so I don't want to go. I don't want to spoil the interview. So come back, listen to that episode. This is a book. I told Jason this in the interview, and I mean it. This is not just the words that I use. This is a book that I really feel has an opportunity to be one of those books that, if it gets the right kind of traction, and hopefully all of the listeners here will go out and grab the book, it has the opportunity to be truly a world-changing book. That's why I wanted him on the show. And it has the ability to really impact the lives of so many people. So Definitely come back. Episode 81. Jason's amazing. Awesome. The interview is hysterical and awesome and fun and super inspiring all at the same time.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing that. And folks, if you got something out of this episode and you really think somebody else would enjoy it too, please share it with your friends. And if you email them, make sure to either CC Matt or CC me. We'd love to see what you're sharing and be able to connect with you that way. But until next time, remember, you were born to change the world. You were born to make history. So believe it, become it, and pass it on.
Yeah, all right. So we'll stay on video. We forgot the quote.
Oh, I didn't do it. My bad.
So it's all right. All right. Well, so we'll share the. Hey, we can talk about that now. We'll share the quote here for you still watching on video who made it this far.
Yeah.
No person will ever make a great business who wants to do it all by himself or get all the credit. And that's from Andrew Carnegie.
So true.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Seriously, thank you for joining us here on this little video experiment, and we'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Was that our outro music that you were just? All right, I'm ending this now, guys. It's painful. See you guys.